I'm attempting to complete every single GameCube game, and I'm using a random number generator to pick the next game. Last episode, we unlocked the Wings of Our Heart and played Baten Kaido's Origins. And in this episode, we're beating up enemies inside of a movie and playing Viewtiful Joe. Viewtiful Joe was released on June 26, 2003, and was developed and published by Capcom. This game was very challenging, and at some points, I thought I wasn't even going to be able to finish it. Before we get started, make sure to like this video because it helps out the channel, and subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of the future games. Without further ado, this is my experience with Viewtiful Joe. In Viewtiful Joe, we're going to complete the new game mode to consider this one complete. So I'll just put this out there at the beginning of the video. I originally tried to play this game on adult mode, but I was struggling to do the simplest of things, so I restarted it later and completed the game on kids mode instead. If you want to judge me, you can, but I just wasn't good enough to play this one on the higher difficulty. Anyways, if you don't know, Viewtiful Joe follows our main character by the name of Joe, taking his girlfriend to watch his favorite superhero, Captain Blue, at the movies. During the movie, his girlfriend Sylvia is kidnapped and taken into the movie. Joe doesn't know what to do, but is also eventually thrown into Movie Land, where he accepts a V-Watch from Captain Blue. This gives him the ability to transform into his own superhero persona known as Viewtiful Joe. Viewtiful Joe is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, where we have to travel through different levels taking out enemies, doing some mild platforming, and fighting mini-bosses and a main boss at the end of each chapter. I also want to point out that the cutscenes are done like movie rolls, which still to this day look amazing, and I feel like this game aged really well. Alright, I think you get the idea of what the game is, so let's move on to the game itself. The first chapter of the game is called Joe the Hero, and this level looks like it takes place in a jungle or something, or at the very least a forest. When we start the game, we don't have the ability to change into our persona, so we have to fight the first few enemies in our standard form, which when we unlock our persona form, if we use all of our VFX meter, we'll be thrown back into this form. VFX is what allows for us to use the main mechanics of this game, but I'll touch base with those as we unlock them. Once we get through the first few enemies, we have a mini boss fight with Captain Blue. He has a half meter of health in this fight, and it's a pretty easy one. But get used to fighting Captain Blue because we have a lot of fights with him in the future. Once we're able to take him out, we get our persona form of Viewtiful Joe, and we can unlock our first mechanic of the game, which allows for us to slow down time. This will let us auto-evade projectiles and incoming attacks. It will also slow down enemies so that we're able to attack them without taking hits instead. I use the slowdown feature more than anything else in this game. Now we can talk about collecting VFX collectibles through the level. At the top of the screen, it will show us how many we collected and how many we need to unlock the next section of our meter of the VFX. So the more we collect, the longer we can stay in slow motion, going further into the level. Once we start a new chapter, this goes back down to just one section of the meter, but it can and will make the game much easier when we have more time with our persona mode. The meter comes back super fast as long as we don't let it go all the way down to 0, so that's something to keep in mind when playing this game. We also have hearts at the top of the screen, which shows us our health before we lose a life, and at the bottom left of the screen it shows us how many lives we have left, which is how many attempts we get before we have to start the chapter over from the previous save point. The next mini-boss we come across in this first level is Joker. This is another one that we will see all the time. He is some sort of magician dude, but yet again, he's not all that hard. He comes out of a slot machine, and when we beat him, we get the token so that we can play the slots. The slots will give us items to advance, like a key, more VFX tokens, and even health refills. But it also has bombs on it that will cause us to take damage. Slowing down the slot machine makes getting the picture on the slots a lot easier. This one gives us a key so that we can move further into the level. Later in the level, we're inside an old medieval castle, and I died for the first time fighting a standard enemy that shoots bullets at you, and I died just because I ran out of VFX meter. and I will end up dying a bunch of times in this playthrough, but I wanted to show what happens when that occurs. So here you go. Finally, onto the final boss of this section of the chapter. It's a giant helicopter that breaks down through the glass of the ceiling and wants to take us out. This fight isn't that hard on paper, but I struggled with this one so much. The helicopter isn't that bad when attacking. It will fly from side to side, shooting rockets at you and machine gun bullets. It will also drop a bunch of smaller enemies to attack us. We can actually use these to hit them into the helicopter, but I didn't know that during this boss fight. The method I used during the fight is slowing down time and hitting back the rockets to hit the helicopter. But I died a lot trying to do this. I died here, and then here again, and here another time, and then another time after that. I was getting beyond frustrated at this point, and I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to finish this game. But then I was able to get this attempt where I was about to die again, but got super lucky, got rid of all the smaller enemies, then I had a free chance to hit the rockets back at the helicopter. If the first few didn't hit the helicopter, I'm not sure if I would have been able to survive this, because I was running out of VFX meter. Once we beat the helicopter, the stairs in the middle of the room opens up, and we can travel down into them, completing the first section of Chapter 1. After finishing a section of the chapter, we're given the option to do 3 things. First, we can save the game, which I would advise doing if you're playing the game. We can power up Joe, and we can move on and just continue to the next section of the chapter. Let's talk about powering up Joe, though. Using the V points we collect during the level from finishing each part with good scores and defeating enemies, we earn these V points, and then we can use them to upgrade Joe. We have the option to restore our health so we don't start the next part with low health. We can also unlock projectiles, learn new moves for Joe that will do more damage against specific enemies. We can also buy extra life so we have more attempts at the next part. We can increase our overall health so that we have more hearts permanently. Upgrade our VFX meter so the meter lasts longer. And we can even purchase a Take 2. This will allow for us to get up once after we lose all of our hearts, so that we can continue the fight without starting the whole section over. I would recommend using these points in areas that you struggle, and if you're good at the game, then maybe just unlock new moves. The next section of Chapter 1 takes place in the cellar of a castle, and we have to worry about new enemies such as bats. But they're no real challenge, so I wouldn't really worry about them too much. We get our second fight with Captain Blue here, where he has 1.5 meters of health, but now that we have the ability to be Viewtiful Joe, this fight is still easy. We have to just watch out for his electric attacks now, but overall it's about the same as the first time we encounter him. When we win this fight, we get the next mechanic of the game, which allows for us to speed up time instead of just slowing it down. This is useful when solving puzzles in the level, and sometimes being able to attack quickly will cause us to catch fire, and this will appear on our hands and feet. I didn't use this much during the game, besides for the puzzles, so maybe it's better than what I think it is, but I'm not too sure. All this leads us into the fight with the final boss of Chapter 1, called Dark Fiend Charles III. He's basically a vampire that takes on the looks of a bat more than a human. His fight isn't that bad, other than he can be hard to hit, because he likes to fly around the area, and when we do land an attack on him, he changes into a bunch of bats. This is when we can do a bunch of damage quickly, because taking out the bats will cause him to take more damage than just hitting him directly. The worst part of this area is the broken platforms we're fighting on, and these red rings that can basically track us. Not too bad to avoid if you go into slow motion, but are pretty annoying overall. He drops these rocks down on us that will do good damage to us, but we can also use them to kick back at him, and if you're lucky and hit him, it will do some good damage and even stun him. It took me a few tries to get the timing right, but I was able to finish this fight with little to no issue. But yet again, I finished this fight with just 1 heart to spare, so I'm basically winning these fights by the skin of my teeth. Once we win the fight, we get another cutscene basically telling us that he doesn't have our girlfriend, and we need to move to the next area to see if she's there. It reminds me of the Mario castle, where Toad tells us that our princess is in another castle. We get an overall ranking for the chapter, and then move on to chapter 2. We're not really going to unlock anything new heading forward, so I'm going to touch base on mainly the boss fights moving further into the game. Just as a heads up. Chapter 2 is called Some Like It Red Hot, and we start this one fighting in the streets of a random city. It does look like the building behind us is the manor we might have just come from, but I'm not entirely sure. On to the first mini-boss this area. It's our third fight with Captain Blue, and this time he is much more difficult to deal with. I don't know if they ramp up the difficulty here or not, but he does the same things, he's just way harder to avoid. I also want to mention that after this boss fight is when I decided to go back and change the difficulty from adult mode to easy mode, because there was no way I was going to be able to finish this game on adult mode. Sorry to disappoint anyone, but I'm just not that great at games like these. Anyways, after a few tries, I was able to take Captain Blue out, and we unlock our last major mechanic for the game. This mechanic allows for us to zoom in on Joe and attack. While in this zoomed in camera, we deal way more damage and can even do some special moves like a spinning kick attack that can hit anyone around us. This will be the most helpful attack with bosses in the future, so keep that in mind. After going through the sewers and riding a bus to clear a massive gap, we get to the end of this section of chapter 1, where we have to take down 2 helicopters in a row. The nice thing about this part is that they aren't both attacking us at the same time, so we can just focus on one and then the other one will come into the fight. This fight is done the same as the one in the manor, so I won't cover this too much. It's nice that they give us a health drop after taking out the first one though. I did end up dying a few times on this part, but mainly because I kept letting my VFX meter go all the way to 0. After the fight, we head into the massive hotel, and we have to work our way through the floors to get to the top of it. There are a lot of puzzles to figure out in this part of the level, but overall, the fights with the minor enemies are really easy. On the top floor, we run into the final boss of Chapter 2, Iron Ogre Hulk Davidson, and this guy isn't all that hard, but is just pretty annoying. During this fight, he will set the ground on fire, and if we stand in it, we will catch on fire, and it will cause us to take damage. We have to not get caught on fire, but if we do, we can use the speed up mechanics to put the fire out. He has this massive axe that he attacks with, and it does a lot of damage, but if we slow down time and do enough damage to it, we can actually break it for a short time, causing him to be stunned, and this is when I found the most success in doing damage to this dinosaur. I think he's a dinosaur. There are some rockets that fly around the area as well, and we can hit them so they attack them, but they don't do any damage really, so it's honestly not worthwhile. This fight took me a few tries to figure out the best strategy, but overall this one isn't that bad. He takes damage like a sponge, but zooming in when we can helps take down that health bar. Yet again, we finish another boss fight with 1 single heart left. I don't know if I'm lucky or if I go into like a focus mode, but either way, I'm not complaining about finishing a boss fight. We get our ranking, and then another cutscene that shows us that a shark is going to blow up an underwater facility. So we decide that we should check that out just in case Sylvia is there, and that ends chapter 2. Much better experience after switching to the lower difficulty, but still a challenge. On to chapter 3. This chapter is called 2 Million Leagues Under the Sea, but this one opens up completely different than any other chapter in the game. We're in a little airplane ship thing, and we have to shoot the enemies as they show up on the screen. It's a shoot 'em up now for the first section of this chapter, and honestly this is one of my favorite parts in the whole game. We can still use our powers to slow and speed up time. We just have to take out the enemies as they appear on the screen until this fighter jet shows up. This is the boss fight to end this section, and I would say that this one isn't that bad. As long as you use the power-ups during the fight, it doesn't take long to bring this thing down, especially speeding up time and shooting a bunch of times quickly. Slowing down time helps avoid attacks and even land some shots on the jet. I would consider this one to be one of the easier bosses in this game, but it could be because of the change in gameplay style that I found it easy. We're able to finish our first major boss fight in this game without being on 1 heart at the end. When we land the final hit, the jet blows up and flies away, and then we jump out of our ship and pose in midair. I don't know what that's all about, But then we fall down into the water facility and we can continue into the next section of the game. The next section of this chapter has us going through the water facility, as I mentioned before. Nothing really happens in this area besides having to go all the way to the end to unlock a door in the earlier part of the level. Let's dive into the next end of the chapter boss fight with the shark that we've seen in the previous cutscene. This is the aquatic terror Gran Bruce, and this boss is a giant pain. Let's cover everything that this guy does that's annoying. First of all, he swims around the area and tries to catch us in his mouth. If this happens, we have to mash our buttons to get out of his mouth, or he will continue to chop us until we die. Second, this guy likes to leave mines all over the area that if we hit, it will cause us damage. He also lets out these small fish that will attack us as well. But the most annoying thing he does by far is that if you're not constantly attacking him, he'll do some heavy breathing and regain his health back that we worked so hard to get down. There is a couple of ways to handle him though. The first is to get him to bite the mines to cause some good damage to himself. And then the second is waiting until he's about to regain some health and then going into the super zoom mode and just attacking like crazy, not allowing him to restore his health. It's not the worst boss to have to fight, but he can just be so annoying overall. This is another boss fight that took me a few tries to get down, but overall wasn't too bad. And I was able to even take him down with more than one heart remaining. So I was pretty happy about that. We didn't get a great ranking for it, but to me that didn't matter that much. We get a cutscene where we enter a giant submarine from the outside of it, and we're able to finish chapter 3 and we can move on to chapter 4, called The Viewtiful Escape. This chapter is set up a bit different than a lot of the other ones. We start by navigating our way through the submarine, avoiding missiles as we try to move around the level. We have to control a flying disc that we can stand on later in the level, but we need to control it to get it there without it getting destroyed. This level has a bunch of other directions we can go for secrets, but for the most part I just went to the end because I was worried about dying a bunch. Once we get to the engine room of the submarine, we have our final boss fight for this chapter, and this fight has us facing off against ourselves. Or another Joe, if you want the proper name for him. This fight is interesting because he's much better than we are. He moves quickly, he can teleport attack us, so we have to be on guard the whole time. He's also able to make a bunch of clones of himself that take turns attacking us. We can take them out pretty easily though by going into zoom mode and just spin kicking. This also does damage to him, but we can't end the fight unless we land the final hit on him directly. He'll bring out our little airplane ship and drop bombs on us as well. We just have to jump to the top and destroy it, so that's not too bad. I died once to this fight because I started it with one heart left, so I was at an unfair advantage going into it. But overall, this fight isn't that bad. A lot of this fight is just being patient and just doing chip damage until we can land a few direct hits on him. The only other thing I would mention in this fight is that if you destroy the airplane ship, it will drop a little hamburger to get you one heart back. Once defeated, however, we get a cutscene, but that's not the end of the chapter. Now we have to escape the submarine before it explodes. This isn't bad besides the one part that we have to slow down time and hit a missile upwards to escape. Other than that, it gives you plenty of time, so I wouldn't worry much about this part. Once we escape, that's the end of the chapter, and we get a cutscene showing a demon form of ourselves. Or at least that's what it looks like. Chapter 5 is up next, and it's called The Midnight Thunder Boy. An interesting name for a chapter, but not all that bad, I guess. This chapter opens up with us going back to the area that was in chapter 2. The city portion of it, at least. But this time it's nightfall, and there are a bunch of lights everywhere. It feels a bit lazy that we came back to the same area, but at least it's at night and it's something different. The first mini-boss we fight in this section is a tank. Something that should be pretty easy at this point in the game, but gave me some issues my first attempt at it. There are two ways to tackle this one. We can kick the shells that the tank shoots at us for a little bit of damage, or we can hit the smaller enemies of the tank for massive damage. I don't know why they would do more damage to the tank, but that's just how it is. All you have to do is stun the small enemies, and then hit them into the tank when the target appears on them. Pretty simple. The second section of this chapter is much different than the first. We have a limited amount of time to get to the front of a train and take out the enemies in there. We have to do this by taking out a bunch of enemies on the way there to collect keys to unlock hatches, so we can move from train car to train car. I enjoyed this section quite a bit. It makes you feel strong because the enemies are weak in this section, at least for the most part. Once we get to the end of the line, we see the entrance of an old temple and think we're going to be able to run inside with no problem. Until lightning strikes show up and we have to face another boss. This is the Blade Master Allosaur. He's a demon form of us that has the ability to control electricity. This fight isn't that bad because we just have to avoid some electricity and then zoom in with Joe and do some spinning attacks. If we knock him into the fountain, he can't use electric attacks, and this causes him to get stunned so that we can get some good damage on him without any issues. The funny thing about this fight is that we can knock him off and then he respawns randomly somewhere, so we want to make sure that we don't do that so that we can get some more hits on him. Sometimes he falls into the lava on his own, and then he'll come back stunned in the fountain, so that can help you out as well. But I wish you could just end this fight by kicking him into lava, as a sort of like an Easter egg in the game. After taking him out, we think he's dying when all of a sudden a bunch of electricity hits him, and then he disappears and we get a cutscene for the end of the chapter. That basically shows us that we aren't any closer to finding our girlfriend, and a boss is waiting for us in the next chapter. This is going to be the hardest boss in the whole game, without a doubt. Chapter 5 is done, and we can move on to Chapter 6, called the Magnificent Five. This chapter is just fighting all the main bosses in a gauntlet. Only they're harder than before, and we can't die between them, or we have to start all the way at the beginning. At least we can't lose all of our lives anyway. I wasn't looking forward to this, but it ended up going better than I expected. I had the most issues with the very first boss of the game in this section. I don't know why I struggled so much with this fight, but it caused me a bunch of problems. So let's go through them all again. The first boss we have to face is the Fiend himself, the Vampire Bat. Then a much stronger version of Hulk Davidson is up next, and this one isn't that bad other than he just has more health this time around. Then we have to tackle Bruce again with the same healing tactics as before, but this time he has more health. Then we have to take on ourselves again. I would go more into these, but I don't like this part of the game. It seems like a lazy decision just to make the game longer. But that's my opinion. Let me know down in the comments if this is something that you liked about the game or not. I would love to hear why you do. Anyways, after finishing all the fights, we find ourselves in this lava arena, and we finally found our girlfriend. She's trapped in a cage in the middle, and we have to fight a brand new boss. The hardest boss in the game. I think with the difficulty here, fighting him could have been this whole chapter, and I would have been completely okay with it. The boss's name is the Inferno Lord Fire Leo. This fight can end super fast if you don't know how to handle the fight, because I died so many times trying to beat this one. The first thing we have to do is use our speed up button and jump over all of the fire rocks that he shoots at us, so that we can get close enough to him to actually get him to stop throwing them. I would say this is the easiest part of the fight. Once we get close to him, we have to use our slowdown feature, plus zooming in to hit him enough to break the shield on his arm. Still not that bad. Once that happens, we have to avoid an attack, and then he goes into this tornado move, where he'll either attack us high or low, and we have to slow down time to avoid each of the attacks. If we get hit once, he will restart the attack, and we have to do it again. If we avoid enough of them, he'll get dizzy, and that's when we can zoom in again and attack him as much as we can to do damage. It sounds easy when I tell you how to handle all of it, but when trying to figure out how to do this while he's doing massive damage to you is very hard. Once we complete that cycle once, we have to do everything all over again. Another thing that is annoying is there are these gaps on the ring we're fighting on, and if we fall below, we can fall into the lava and basically lose all of our health because we can't get back out of it. I would say this fight took me about 20 tries before I was finally able to complete it. After some lucky RNG with his spinning attack, I was able to finally take him out. I actually ended up getting really good at the other parts of that fight from doing it so many times before. We get another cutscene where Sylvia and Joe are finally reunited, but this giant glove comes down and grabs her and takes her into space. It's a very large hand. We get in our airplane ship and head after them, heading towards the top of the temple. That ends chapter 6, and we move on to the final chapter of the game called Joe and Sylvia. This chapter starts off with us in a space station where we have to fight endless enemies as we jump from the top of the area with enough force to unlock the doors to get to the next room. This part is frustrating because if the enemies get in the way, it slows us down. And there are these flying ships that get in the way too, so we have to time it just right to get the full force we need to unlock the doors. It took me a minute, but I was finally able to get through. Later in the level, we have to fight mecha forms of Fire Leo, but these ones aren't as strong, and we don't have to deal with all the fire and lava, so I was able to take these ones out with the same tornado strategy as before. The next annoying part is where we have to take out the other spaceships in the back of this big room by hitting missiles as they come out of this launcher. It's not hard or anything, but it just takes forever to wait for one to come out, and then wait for a next one. I don't know how many missiles we have to hit, but it felt like it was way too many. At the end of this section, we find out that the hand that took Sylvia was no other than Captain Blue himself. But this time, he's huge and just floating in space randomly. After talking to us for a second, he quick changes into a mech version of himself, known as the Omnipotent King Blue. We can't fight him with our normal form, so we also transform using our Power Rangers power and become a mech ourselves, known as the Mega Megabot 6 Majin. Now we can hold our own in the boss fight with him as we walk on the planet and attack him. I would say that this fight is pretty easy. We have to avoid a few things that try to hit us, but he doesn't really attack us directly. We have to avoid the laser from the spaceship in the background, avoid the lightning strikes that he shoots down on us, which standing in one place can keep us safe. And then the last attack that we need to avoid is this fleet of spaceships. All we have to do really is jump over them, but if you're not paying attention, they'll take you down. When he moves closer to us, we can jump up, slow down time, and zoom in and do massive damage to him. As long as we play smart during this part, taking him down doesn't take very long at all. After landing the final hits on him, his mech blows up and we both fall back down to the space station area for one final battle with Captain Blue. This fight is no different than all the other ones in the game. I think this one might be easier than all the other ones. We just have to avoid the electric attack again and time our attacks with slowing down and zooming in. Or at least that's how I handled this fight. In standard fashion with this game, I finished this fight with one single heart left, but ending fights with drama is just how I play this game. We get one final cutscene and it's a longer one, but I will sum it up. We find out that Captain Blue was a director that just wanted to make hero movies, but one day he was sucked into the movie and became the hero known as Captain Blue. Being in the movies for so long, he was beginning to lose his sanity, and that's why we ended up getting sucked into this movie. We find out that Sylvia is his daughter, and that he almost forgot about her altogether. Then we're told that we're the new hero for people to enjoy watching, and we get an alert that something bad is about to happen. Captain Blue and Sylvia are going to leave the movie, but Sylvia wants to come with us, and asks for Captain Blue to give her a V-Watch so that she can be a hero too. Then it talks about there being a plot twist in every movie, and we have to play again to get the true ending, which I didn't do because I really don't want to. And I think you have to play on an even harder difficulty. Let me know if this is something I should look into, or if you ever went back and played through the game again. Then finally we get the credits for the game, and we finish this one. During the credits we get a scene where Joe has a band with all the bosses in the game, and they sing a song. I wasn't expecting this at all. What a strange thing to add into the game. It's pretty good though. Would I recommend this game? This one was very hard for me. I really enjoyed the game, but the adult mode is very difficult, and I wasn't able to complete the game on that mode. But I was able to finish it on kids mode, but that made the game too easy. So I think I would still recommend it for the art design and the gameplay being fun, but it's close for me to not recommend it, because not everyone is going to be able to finish the game on adult mode. But let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you want to know what's next, stick around. But if not, thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe, like, and share this video, and we will see you in the next one. So, we get to find out what we're playing next on the count of 3. So in 3, 2, 1, we are going to 139 is our next game, which is Fantastic Four.